The sun was setting over Washington, D.C., casting a golden glow on the marble buildings. Senator J.D. Vance stepped out of his car in front of a well-known spelled bistro, tucked between government offices and trendy boutiques. He looked tired. The day had been long heated debates, media questions, and endless meetings. All he wanted now was a quiet dinner with his two aides. The restaurant was calm when he entered. A pianist played softly in the corner. Waiters moved smoothly between tables. Most of the guests didn't notice when JD walked in. He was used to it, famous enough to be recognized, but not enough to stop a room. He walked to the hostess stand and smiled. "Reservation for Vance," he said calmly. The young hostess glanced at the tablet in front of her, her eyes moving. Quickly, when she looked up again, her expression had changed. Her smile had vanished. She looked nervous. "One moment, please," she said, and disappeared through the kitchen doors. JD raised an eyebrow. Something felt strange. His aides, standing a few steps behind, exchanged glances. Few minutes passed. Whispers started among the waiters. One of them, holding a tray of wine glasses, stopped mid-step when he saw Vance. Someone at a nearby table looked up, then leaned in to whisper to their companion. Then a man in a dark apron walked out of the back. It was clearly the manager. His smile was forced, his steps careful. "Senator," he said, "I'm afraid we won't be able to serve you tonight." JD blinked. "May I ask why?" His voice was steady, polite. The manager looked uncomfortable. "It's our company policy. We prioritize values and staff safety." JD didn't say anything for a moment. He just stared at the man. Not angry, but thoughtful. He understood the real reason. It wasn't about safety, it was about politics. About him. Guests were now watching. A man across the room had pulled out his phone and started recording. The air felt heavy, like something important was about to happen. JD finally nodded slowly. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't demand anything. "Are you denying me because of who I am or what I believe?" He asked softly. The manager's face tightened. "We just want to make sure everyone feels safe and welcome," he repeated. But he couldn't meet JD's eyes. "I see," JD said. Then he reached into the inside pocket of his coat and pulled out a small, worn copy of the U.S. Constitution. Without a word, he placed it gently on. The hostess stand. "This," he said, "protects the right to speak freely, even when it's uncomfortable." He turned, nodded to his aides, and walked out. No shouting, no threats. Just silence, tension, and a sense that something bigger had just happened. Outside, cameras were already flashing. The man who recorded inside was now uploading the video. By the time JD's car pulled away from the curb, the internet had caught fire. Some called it bravery, others called it a stunt. But everyone agreed it was a moment the country wouldn't forget. And no one knew yet. It was only the beginning. By the time the senator's car had crossed the Potomac, the video had been seen by over 1 million people. A 30-second clip, grainy, shaky, and taken from behind a wine racks, showed J.D. Vance calmly placing the Constitution on the hostess stand before walking out. The caption read, "Senator denied dinner over his beliefs." His response? Classy. AF, within minutes. The video was on Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, and cable news. J.D. Vance didn't speak much on the ride home. His aides were glued to their phones, reading tweets aloud, monitoring hashtags, watching the story take on a life of its own. Hashtag denied dinner is trending. Fox wants a statement. CNN's panel is already split. In under an hour, the video had triggered a national debate. Talk shows began dissecting it like a crisis. Was this free speech under attack? Or just the consequence of public accountability? Was the restaurant protecting its staff for making a political statement? The bistro, once known for its truffle risotto and jazz brunch, now faced thousands of review bombs and online threats. 1-star ratings poured in alongside 5-star praises. The owner disabled comments. The phone rang non-stop. Protesters showed Up outside the next morning, some waving flags, others holding signs that read, "Hate has no home here." Inside his townhouse, JD watched in silence. His wife poured him coffee and said nothing. She had seen this kind of media frenzy before, but this felt different. Not because of the attack, because of how he handled it. That morning, JD Vance agreed to appear on a national morning news program live. He didn't bring a press secretary. He didn't send out a statement. He just showed up. The host greeted him with her usual polished tone, but even she looked a little surprised by how calm he was. "Senator Vance," she began, "you were denied service last night. What happened?" He kept his voice even, never once raising. I walked into a restaurant," he said. "I didn't shout, didn't campaign. I asked for a meal. And someone decided I wasn't welcome not for what I did, but for what I believe. That's okay. But it's worth asking, are we still a country where we talk to each other? Or are we building walls between every table?" The clip went viral again. His tone measured, humble, and pointed hit a nerve. Support came not just from conservatives, but from unexpected voices, independents, some liberals, even international commentators. A former Obama speechwriter tweeted, "You don't have to agree with JD Vance to admire how he handled that." Meanwhile, the bistro's manager released a short statement through a lawyer. "We have the right to refuse service to protect our staff's mental health and safety. We acted on our values." But values, it turned out, were complicated. A freelance journalist named Maya Rowe, who worked with an independent news blog, dug into the restaurant's history. She found internal posts from employee forums discussing blacklisted public figures, and leaked a memo suggesting staff had been encouraged to avoid political disruptions by declining service to high-risk names. The public asked, who made the list? Why? Was this really about safety or political discrimination? JD Vance didn't fan the flames. He tweeted one thing: "We're all neighbors, even when we disagree." But behind the scenes, the storm was growing. Other politicians weighed in. Some accused Vance of weaponizing the moment. Others accused the restaurant of censorship. Cable news spent hours debating what it meant. On MSNBC, a professor argued that public figures should expect public consequences. On Fox, a guest called the denial a dangerous erosion of civil society. Back in D.C., aides urged JD to ride the wave, to make a campaign ad out of it. But he refused. "Not everything has to be war," he told them. That's when he made a decision that no one expected. He called a meeting with his staff, local activists, journalists, even critics. He told them he wanted to hold a public event, a unity supper. A dinner open to everyone, regardless of political beliefs. No VIP sections, no speeches. Just food and conversation. The location: a local community center, not fancy, not dramatic. There would be one rule only: civil dialogue. No yelling, no cameras inside, no talking points. His team was skeptical. The media wouldn't like it. The donors wouldn't care. But he didn't care about that. "This isn't a campaign," JD said. "It's a dinner table." And so the invitations went out, quietly, respectfully. No press releases, no celebrity guests. Just an open door and a lot of folding chairs. The moment had gone viral. Now it was about whether that moment could turn into something real. Something. More than hashtags. The Unity Supper was announced on a plain black and white flyer posted on JD Vance's personal website. No big headlines. It's just a date, a time, a location, and a sentence that read, "You're invited to dinner. Bring your story." 'Twas held on a Tuesday night at a community center in Northern Virginia, far from Capitol Hill, but far enough to feel removed from its noise. The center was modest: long plastic tables, folding chairs, paper plates, and buffet trays. There was no red carpet, no security detail visible, no staff wearing earpieces, just volunteers greeting people at the door, guiding them toward seats. The food came from a mix of local vendors, Greek, Mexican, Indian, soul food. Everything donated. There were no table numbers, no name tags. It's just people from all walks of Tato. If we're more walks of life, college students, veterans, clergy, bartenders, congressional staffers. And somewhere near the back, a busboy from the original restaurant wearing a hoodie and baseball cap, watching quietly. J.D. Vance arrived just before 6 p.m. He wore no tie. He didn't bring a speech. He shook hands with everyone he passed. For the first hour, he didn't speak at all, just sat, ate, and listened. Someone told a story about their immigrant father being denied housing in the 70s. Another shared how her conservative mother had been bullied out of a PTA group. Others said they were just tired of being told who to hate. The media tried to get in. Reporters hovered outside. Some begged to be let in, but the rules were clear. No cameras, no quotes, no performance. Inside, people were surprised at how natural it felt. How quickly the small talk turned into real talk. How easily people admitted that they didn't understand each other, and how powerful it felt when someone simply said, "Tell me more." At one table, a young activist from Chicago sat across from a retired coal worker from Kentucky. They shared memories of different struggles: urban poverty, economic decline, and found an unexpected overlap in their pain. At another, a transgender college student and a pro-life Catholic nun talked about faith and fear and dignity. And all around them, J.D. Vance moved from table to table. Not dominating the room, but observing, listening, asking quiet questions, laughing sometimes, falling silent at others. Later that night, someone stood up to offer a toast. It wasn't a politician or a donor or a famous name. It was an elementary school teacher from Maryland. She said, "Tonight reminded me what it means to be part of a country, not a party, not a hashtag. A country." The room fell still, then applauded, not loud, but with the kind of sincerity that fills a room more than volume ever could. A few people cried, not because of politics, it's because of the possibility. After the dinner ended, people lingered in the parking lot, exchanging phone numbers, making plans to meet again. A few offered to start a monthly dinner group. Others wanted to host their own unity suppers in other cities. The next day, J.D. Vance posted one single photo from the night: a paper plate, half-finished meal, and a handwritten note that read, "Thank you for listening." The caption underneath was just 2 words: "More of this." Despite the absence of press inside, stories began to leak out. Attendees wrote blogs, shared anonymous reflections. One viral Medium post from a self-described progressive Gen Z activist titled, "I dined with J.D. Vance. Here's what shocked me most," garnered hundreds of thousands of views. "I expected a stunt," she wrote. "What I found was a room full of people trying, actually trying." Meanwhile, backlash still brewed. Some political operatives accused Vance of manufacturing a media moment. "Don't be fooled," one tweet read. "This is just another photo op disguised as empathy." A senior strategist for a rival senator said, "He's not bridging divides, he's branding them." But the public's reaction was harder too. Control. Because people weren't reacting to headlines, they were reacting to each other. Videos began to circulate of people hosting small dinner groups inspired by the Unity Supper. Churches, college campuses, even VFW halls picked up the idea. It wasn't a movement. Not yet, but it was momentum. Back in Washington, the original restaurant that had denied J.D. service issued another, more thoughtful statement. This one wasn't written by a lawyer. It came directly from the owner. She admitted the decision was personal and said she regretted letting fear drive policy. "I acted in haste," she wrote. "I let the politics of the moment replace the hospitality of my profession. I'm sorry." J.D. Vance replied within the hour. "Apology accepted. Dinner still on, if you're ever up for it." The media picked it up naturally. But by then, the story had shifted from outrage to repair. In the weeks that followed, J.D. Vance didn't gloat. He didn't declare victory. He just kept showing up to town halls and community forums talking about one idea again and again. You don't have to agree to sit down. You just have to be willing. And in a country drowning in confrontation, that message quiet, consistent. Stubbornly hopeful cut through louder than shouting ever could. It was a Thursday morning when the call came in. CNN's primetime anchor, Evelyn Torres, had been trying to book Senator J.D. Vance for weeks ever since the Unity Supper gained national attention. He had declined every request until now. But on that morning, just as the news cycle was beginning, to pivot to an unrelated scandal overseas, Vance's office confirmed. He would appear for a live sit-down interview that evening. 1 hour, no preconditions. The network immediately shifted its programming. This wasn't just politics. It had become something else's unpredictable moment where culture, ideology, and media collided. Producers scrambled. Analysts were called. In a special segment title was created, Bridges and Backlash, the J.D. Vance interview. At 7:59 p.m., the red light blinked on. Evelyn sat across from him in the studio, her posture firm, eyes steady, tablet in hand. J.D. wore a navy suit, no tie, a small flag pin on his lapel. His expression was calm, not performative, not passive, just ready. The opening questions were expected. The incident at the restaurant, the viral video, the Unity Supper. Vance responded, the same way he had throughout the week, direct, composed, refusing to exaggerate. But Evelyn was a veteran. She didn't linger on the easy stuff. Senator, she said, shifting tone. Some critics argue you're trying to rebrand yourself in the middle of rising political polarization. That you're using civility as a strategy, not a principle. What do you say to that? J.D. didn't flinch. I say they're probably right to be skeptical. Most people in politics only show up to speak. I'm trying to show up to listen. Might be strategic, yes, but it's also personal. Evelyn leaned in. Personal how? There was a beat, a breath. Then he answered, I grew up watching people shout past each other. In bars, on porches, even around our dinner table. And I swore that if I ever had a platform, I'd try to build something that wasn't built on volume. Evelyn paused. Then pivoted again. Let's talk about the Constitution, she said, referring to the pocket-sized copy he had placed on the hostess stand. Some called that stunt theatrical. Others called it manipulative. What did you mean by it? J.D. nodded. I meant that we all keep saying we love this country, but we forget that disagreement is baked into it. Free expression. That's not just a slogan. That's a responsibility. Evelyn challenged again. You've voted for controversial bills. You've made statements in the past that alienated certain communities. Do you understand why some people believe the restaurant staff was simply exercising their freedom by choosing not to serve you? J.D. hesitated not out of confusion, but out of care. I do, he said slowly. And I didn't call for them to be punished. I didn't boycott, didn't tweet angry things. I left, quietly. But I also think there's a difference between freedom and avoidance, between protest and rejection. We can say no to ideas without saying no to people. The interview deepened. International tensions were brought up particularly. The fragile state of US diplomacy after a recent trade breakdown with Eastern Europe. Evelyn pressed him on his foreign policy stances. Vance didn't deflect. He explained, sometimes carefully, sometimes with bluntness. There's a danger, he said, when American leaders speak abroad the same way they fight at home, careless, aggressive, hyperbolic. We've turned diplomacy into theater. That's not sustainable. And then came the surprise. Evelyn turned to the screen behind them. We have someone joining us remotely, she announced. A new feed appeared. It was the restaurant manager, live, from a quiet room, face lit by a single desk lamp. He looked nervous. Evelyn, unfazed, turned to JD. He's agreed to say a few words. Do you want to hear them? JD Vance nodded once. The manager who had refused all interviews before now spoke plainly. I didn't expect any of this. I thought it'd be one awkward moment that passed, but it didn't. And what I saw after the dinner, the interview zit, made me think. I don't agree with Senator Vance on much. But I didn't act fairly. I acted from fear. There was a long pause. Evelyn asked, Senator, your reaction? JD looked directly into the camera. Thank you, he said, for being honest. That's all any of us can ask for. And that was it. No demand, no victory lap. The interview ended quietly. Fireworks. Just a handshake between JD and Evelyn. As the credits rolled, the camera caught JD walking off set, not flanked by staff, bed alone, adjusting his jacket as he stepped into the hallway's shadow. But the reaction online was anything but quiet. Clips spread like wildfire. #BridgeNotWalls trended again. 3 days after the televised interview, JD Vance stood at the steps of the Jefferson Memorial. The Washington skyline behind him was hazy with summer heat. He had just concluded a press conference, not one about the restaurant, but about a new bipartisan initiative to regulate AI ethics in federal agencies. But the media wasn't focused on the bill. They were focused on a man who, within a week, had gone from being quietly controversial to dangerously charismatic. As cameras packed up, a young journalist from a progressive media outlet called out, Senator Vance, would you attend a live town hall with one of your harshest critics, Congresswoman Ala Moreno? He paused, smiled faintly. Sure, he said. Send her my regards. The next morning, Moreno responded on X, formerly Twitter. Challenge accepted. Let's do it. No handlers, no scripts. Live audience. The date was set. The event was to be hosted by Al Jazeera English, neutral ground to avoid domestic media bias. It would take place at the National Constitution Center in Philadelphia, broadcast globally, 2 figures, to Americas. 1 stage. Moreno was a rising star. Latina, progressive, fierce in debate. A former public defender who'd grown popular for her viral floor speeches dismantling conservative talking points. JD Vance was her ideological opposite, yet increasingly hard to pigeonhole. The matchup wasn't just political, it was narrative. Warfare. As the night began, viewers tuned in from all over the world. Europe, Latin America. The Middle East, CNN and Fox both rebroadcasted the feed, breaking usual protocol. The room buzzed with energy, packed with college students, veterans, union workers, and business leaders. The moderator, a seasoned international journalist, laid the ground rules. No shouting, no interruptions. 5 rounds, final words. Then, audience Q&A. Round 1. Civil discourse. Moreno opened by accusing Vance of using civility to sanitize regressive policies. You smile through policies that hurt the working class, she said, tone sharp but articulate. That's not Unity's cosmetics. JD replied calmly, if words are cosmetics, then perhaps volume is camouflage. I don't claim to have perfect policies, but I don't think outrage improves them, the crowd murmured. No claps, just tension. Round 2. Immigration. Moreno hit hard. You've supported policies that separate families at the border. That's not security. That's cruelty. Vance looked her in the eye. And you've supported sanctuary policies that let violent criminals evade justice. We both have blind spots. The question is, do we care enough to see them? The room was silent. Round 3. Media and truth. The moderator asked about trust in journalism. Vance, I don't hate the media. Fear what people are becoming because of it. We reward rage and mock sincerity. Moreno, sincerity doesn't erase harm. You can be kind and still dangerous. Round 4. Foreign affairs. Tension peaked. Vance criticized Marino's support for a recent international intervention. You endorsed a policy that destabilized a region with a drone strike, then called it is hard truth. If we ever lose our horror at war, we lose our humanity. Marino countered. You voted against refugee aid. Where's your humanity? He didn't fire back. He just said, you're right. I did, and I regret it. The room froze. Not because of a zinger, but because of honesty. Round 5. Future the moderator asked, what's the one thing you admire about your opponent? Moreno sighed. He listens. He's wrong often. But he listens. JD smiled faintly. She's relentless. In a world of cowards, that matters. Then came final words. Moreno called for a country willing to embrace discomfort. Change doesn't feel good, but it's the only way forward. J.D. Vance, in a voice quieter than expected, said, what happened to me in that restaurant, what happened after taught me that we can't argue people into compassion. We have to live it. The audience Q&A was even more intense. A black veteran asked about systemic racism. A Ukrainian student asked where America stands now. A Muslim small business owner asked if she was welcome in today's politics. Both Vance and Moreno responded carefully. Vance especially seemed to weigh each word, not to dodge, but to ensure he wasn't creating another soundbite that would unravel the fragile moment they'd built. After 2 hours, the event ended. No fireworks, no handshake photo op. Just two opponents walking off the stage in opposite directions, exhausted, thoughtful, human. But what happened next wasn't on television. Backstage, JD stood quietly near the loading dock exit, sipping from a paper cup. Moreno walked past, paused, and looked back. You meant it, didn't you? About the refugee vote? He nodded. Too late, maybe? But yeah. She walked away, then turned again. Don't waste that. If you're going to shift, then really shift. Don't perform it. I'm not, he said. Paying for it. Trust me. It's that night. The headlines were mixed. Some claimed Vance had finally been outmatched. Others said Moreno came off too sharp. But almost all agreed something had changed. It wasn't just policy. It was posture. The political battlefield had made room for reflection. And J.D. Vance, whether by accident or design, was now at the center of something bigger than ideology. He was becoming a lens through which America questioned itself. You said, Part 6, ChatGPT said. The leak 3 days after the town hall. Everything shifted again, but not in a way anyone anticipated. It started with a midnight alert sent to the inbox of investigative journalist Rachel Elcoury, known for her work exposing covert political lobbying in the U.S. government. The email contained an encrypted document. No name, no message. Just one line in the subject. Follow the files. Vance, 2016 Langley Phoenix Protocol. Rachel, who worked for a global investigative outlet, partnered with both Al Jazeera and The Guardian. Didn't sleep that night. She called in her editor. Then she cross-verified the metadata. What she uncovered was explosive. Inside the files were transcripts, redacted memos, and one internal CIA briefing from 2016, back when J.D. Vance was still a venture capitalist, not yet a senator. The memos referred to Phoenix Protocol, a covert influence campaign involving former intelligence assets embedded in media, think tanks, and political fundraising networks. One of the names loosely tied to the early support infrastructure, J.D. Vance. There wasn't anything definitively illegal, no smoking gun. But it suggested Vance had ties to a classified national security initiative designed to nurture ideologically moderate candidates. Post-2016 to stabilize internal discourse. In the wake of growing populism, in other words, the senator who had positioned himself as anti-establishment may have been part of a system stabilization effort designed by the establishment. Rachel Tripple's source before publication. The story broke at 6 a.m. on every major news platform. The headline was J.D. Vance groomed by a shadow state network. Leaked files raised questions about his rise. By 9 a.m., J.D. Vance was in a closed-door Intelligence Committee session. Cameras weren't allowed, but one staffer leaked that the senator looked visibly shaken for the first time in years. His office declined public comment. On cable news, chaos exploded. Conservative anchors called it a smear campaign from the deep state left. Progressive voices demanded a federal inquiry. Meanwhile, conspiracy channels online splintered in every direction, some claiming Vance was a CIA puppet. Others claiming he was a whistleblower, being punished for getting too close to some larger truth. By midday, a bigger question surfaced. What is the Phoenix Protocol? The White House issued a carefully worded statement denying knowledge of any ongoing covert operations involving members of Congress. But former intelligence officers, now analysts on contract with major networks, began to admit on air that Phoenix may have been real, possibly defunct, but had morphed into an unofficial psychological resilience program after the 2016 election to prevent Democratic breakdown. The American public wasn't sure what to believe. That night, Vance finally broke his silence. Instead of a press conference, he appeared on a live stream interview hosted by veteran CNN journalist Fareed Zakaria. It was a high-risk move. Zakaria was known for his incisive, nonpartisan interviews. What's true? Fareed asked bluntly. J.D. Vance stared into the camera. In 2016, I was approached by a group of former defense officials and policy strategists. They pitched a think tank project focused on civil democratic resilience. Yes, I met with them. Yes, I accepted early funding for a book tour, one never completed. But I was never a CIA asset. No one controlled me. They wanted me to be one thing. I became something else. Fareed leaned forward. So, you're saying you outgrew the machine? They tried to build. I'm saying I walked away from it. And I paid the price quietly. Then came the most damning question. Did you ever inform the Senate Intelligence Committee about these connections before taking office? A pause. No, because I didn't think I needed to. And maybe that was a mistake. It was the closest thing to a confession. Not of guilt, but of misjudgment. As the interview ended, reactions splintered again. JD's defenders said he showed integrity. His critics said he admitted to hiding a conflict of interest. More than ever, he was both hero and villain, depending on who you asked. That evening, Rachel Elkery received another encrypted message. This one was different. It contained surveillance images, blurry, time-stamped, some dated within the past 2 weeks. One clearly showed a person resembling J.D. Vance exiting a federal building not listed in his official schedule. Another showed a meeting between a defense contractor, a Russian diplomat. The days that followed were unlike anything the country had seen since the height of Watergate. After J.D. Vance refused the off-the-record meeting with Langley, the intelligence community shifted from quiet concern to strategic containment. Multiple, unnamed officials began leaking to media. Outlets insisting the Phoenix Protocol was never designed to interfere with elections. It was academic, one insisted. An ideological vaccine against populist radicalism. But public trust had already ruptured. Rachel Elkery published the next phase of her report under the global banner. The Monroe Doctrine 2, An American Empire's New Script. This one went far beyond Vance. It detailed how Phoenix Protocol had splintered into multiple doctrines, across sectors, some embedded in foreign diplomacy, others buried in defense lobbying, data firms, or even social media platforms. The most damning part of the report included an internal strategy memo from a State Department-affiliated think tank. It read, Monroe Doctrine 2 seeks to maintain hemispheric influence through non-military cultural steering, institutional funding, and civilian narrative stabilization. J.D. Vance wasn't the architect. He was merely a case study. And now all eyes were on him to explain his role. The Senate Intelligence Committee scheduled a public hearing. It would be broadcast live. It was being called the New Church Committee, a reference to the 1975 hearings that revealed illegal surveillance by the CIA. FBI and NSA, protesters gathered outside the Capitol. Media outlets ran countdown timers. CNN's coverage called it the civility candidate under oath. Jazeera ran with the headline, Senator Vance faces America's ghost protocol. Inside the packed hearing room, Vance looked more pale than usual, but calm. Cameras flashed. Opponents on the panel sharpened their tone. Senator Wyatt Rosen, a Democrat from Oregon, leaned forward. Did you or did you not receive strategic or financial assistance from individuals tied to Phoenix Protocol or any continuation thereof? Vance didn't blink. Yes. In 2016, a $70,000 grant toward a speaking tour on cultural division in post-industrial America. I disclosed it as private income under a consulting category. In hindsight, I should have flagged the source more transparently. You now know that some of those sources were retired intelligence operatives. I do, and I regret not questioning their motives sooner. The hearing moved from testimony into accusation. A few hardliners called for Vance's resignation. One senator insinuated he may have violated national security norms. But Vance held his ground. Then came the unexpected twist. A young aide passed a sealed envelope to Senator Rosen mid-hearing. The senator frowned as he read the contents, then leaned to whisper with his legal counsel. Cameras caught the moment. The hearing recessed. An hour later, a bombshell dropped. The envelope contained an anonymous legal affidavit and corroborated logs showing that 3 other sitting senators, 2 Democrats, 1 Republican, had also received funds, training, or informal strategic briefings from operatives connected to Phoenix Protocol or its sister programs. J.D. Vance, it turned out, wasn't alone. He was just the first exposed. The Senate scrambled. Within 48 hours, calls for a full bipartisan investigation echoed through both chambers. Whispers of a select committee, a modern version of the church committee, grew louder. That night, J.D. Vance returned to Fareed Zakaria for a follow-up interview. I was naive, he admitted. But I was not complicit, and I wasn't the only one. Fareed raised his eyebrow. So what happens now? Now, Vance said, voice level, we drain a different kind of swamp. The one hidden behind bureaucracy and philanthropy. The one that wears a smile and calls itself democracy's friend. Backstage, Rachel Elcowry watched from the green room. She had just been offered a classified briefing by a whistleblower. Inside the Department of Defense, an editor warned her it might be dangerous. But Rachel knew something else. The public was waking up. In the weeks that followed, several high-level resignations shook Washington. Think tanks cut ties with shadowy donors. A quiet review of FARA Foreign Agents Registration Act laws began to pick up steam. And America bruised, fractured, paranoid, dentered, a new phase of political awareness. J.D. Vance, for all his controversy, became a strange kind of symbol. Not of purity, but of collision between truth and manipulation, between control and free will. 1 month later, a documentary aired on Al Jazeera titled Shadow Civility: The Secret Politics of Unity. In the final scene, Vance is shown walking alone across the National Mall. Voiceover by Rachel says, he stepped into a restaurant and was denied a table. But what he walked into next was far more dangerous. The table he finally sat at was set long ago, and we were all already eating. Fade to black. Silence. The screen cut to live news coverage. A special session of Congress was being called to launch the most sweeping political transparency reforms in a generation. The story had begun with dinner. It ended in a reckoning.